Okay, welcome back to Bounce Around Charleston. Well, we have with us the COVID task force. And man, there's some powerful people on here tonight. And Dr. Paula Orr, I'm going to let you start this conversation off with telling us what the COVID task force is doing, and then you will introduce our guests. Dr. Orr.
Certainly. Thank you so much for having us and giving us an opportunity to share the great work that has been going on for the last 9 to 10 months, really since the pandemic hit the Charleston area. In my role as president of the Charleston chapter of the Links Incorporated, much of our face-to-face activities came to a halt, but we knew that we needed to go into action mode with regards to the pandemic, and in particular, the impact that we understood that it would have on Black and Brown communities. We also understood that that would take a collaborative effort. And so, you know, you can go far with one person, but you can go faster with a lot of people. And so what we did is we sort of reached out to organizations that shared our same mission, to include the D9 organization, the alumni associations of the 8 historically Black colleges and universities in the state of South Carolina, the churches, the National Council of Negro Women, and about 54 organizations. We sort of asked that they join us on this journey.
So Dr. Orr, these are the organizations who are helping you with the task force to get your mission accomplished.
Yes, yes. And in that, we're also using them as conduits for information. So as we get information, we share it with all of these organizations so that it can be shared on a broader level, not just within our respective organizations and chapters. And so everyone does a really good job of doing that. And so tonight, who you have joined with us are Garcia Williams, who is also a member of the Charleston chapter of the Links Incorporated, but she also represents a nonprofit organization, the Medi, which is one of our collaborators. Crystal Rouse, who is a dynamo in and of itself, who represents the National Council of Negro Women, the Bethune-Leonard section, of which he is the president, and the A. Philip Randolph Institute Association secretary, right, Crystal? Did I get that correct? And then Mr. Jerome Harris, who also is acting in a dual role as a member of ASALA, which allows us to be able to mark the historic nature of the pandemic and the work that we're doing, but also he is also a member of the BOULE. And so I would like to mention just one other thing, Randolph, and that is that when we started the task force, the idea was to focus on 4 specific areas, and those are economics, education, health, and civic engagement. Because at the same time that we were finding ourselves in the midst of a pandemic, we were also finding ourselves in the middle of an upcoming election and the census. And so, so those were the 4 areas that we focused on to begin with.
Okay, so Ms. Garcia Williams with Medi, what has been your role in all of this? You unmute yourself.
I was trying to avoid the background, so let me start again. First of all, it's great to see you again. And
yes.
Secondly, you were introduced to the Medi through our Red Dress Sunday event, which is fast approaching. So that's another conversation for another time. But as you well know, we are a community resource center. And when President Orr came up with the idea of the task force, I was the first one to volunteer to set in because we are primarily healthcare focused. And our goal was to engage as many resources as possible relating to testing and how we could support the testing effort, looking at PPE, where we could provide and support the community, where there were gaps. As we said, many organizations were doing things individually, but we found the strength in collective support for our efforts. So we did organize and coordinate several testing sites. But one of the things that I think we were most proud of as part of the COVID task force and the Medi was we provided lunch and resources to the staff and providers who were actually doing the testing. So our collective efforts allowed us to meet them at their greatest need and just engage with them in some way to give them the kudos and the support that they needed for the work that they were doing as frontline supporters. So we're very proud of the work that we did through the Medi, but also with the team that we were able to amass with this COVID task force. And we still have a lot more yet to do, but we're excited about what we were able to accomplish.
Okay, and Ms. Crystal Rouse, the National Council of Negro Women, what is your role?
Yes, sir. So my role, both within NCNW and within A. Philip Randolph Institute, was pretty much to help facilitate and coordinate some of the efforts that we put forth as it pertains to health, education, and civic engagement. And I was blessed to run across these dynamic examples of Black excellence in the Charleston area to actually collaborate and work with. Because one of the things that we find often is that organizations all have the same mission and vision or similar mission and visions and end up working in silos rather than working together. So with the COVID-19 task force, it allowed us to collaborate with food distributions. We did over 20 food distributions from May until December, where we distributed over 600,000 pounds of food. We also assisted individuals with voter registration, voter education, Census 2020 information. The COVID-19 task force also allowed us to collaborate with, of course, election protection. We did a lot of that during the election season. Pretty much the COVID-19 task force was right on time and exactly what our community needed. So it was just a humbling experience to be able to work with such dynamic individuals within our area.
Thank you. And Brother Jerome Harris, sir, what is your role?
So being the brother in the group,
Yes.
the Association for the Study of African American Life and History Charleston branch, throughout 2020, the Black vote was our theme. So working with the task force, we had ongoing seminars about the historical perspectives, strengthening involved on-site voter registrations, and very happy to be part of the working group that put together a very excellent resource guide that was produced by the task force that was broadly disseminated. In addition to that, we tried to make certain that the other members of the task force were aware of national activities and resources that were available through ASALA, so that we were trying to get maximum impact. On the side of the Gamma Lambda Boule, the membership was very diverse. The brothers made an early commitment to raise money and wanted to target providing resources, food, PPEs, and educational materials, and made the decision to focus on the public housing communities in Charleston and North Charleston. So we were pleased to be able to mount those efforts. In addition, the brethren, Dr. Thaddeus Bell, through his Closing the Gap, did a series of webinars, public PSAs, and the like. And you may have read recently, as last Sunday, one of our Boule brothers, Dr. Melvin Brown, published an article, an op-ed, addressing the question of why African descended people need to take the vaccine. In addition, we worked in support of the economic empowerment component. A number of our board members are officials on various bank boards. They try to make certain that those banks made themselves accessible to Black businesses who wanted to apply for PPP. And in addition, we've been working with Increasing Hope, a nonprofit who very successfully has just secured a Small Business Administration's Women's Enterprise Center that will be operating in North Charleston. So we're working to support that as well.
Okay, thank you so much. So Dr. Orr, what are your plans to continue to do work in the community?
Well, that's a really good question because as you can see, COVID-19 is not going away, not in any near future. It will be with us in some form or fashion, and the lingering effects, of course, will continue to disproportionately affect Black and Brown communities. So I think right now, we are going to be shifting our focus to try to do more education about the vaccine in particular. There are startling statistics that show that the number of minorities that are willing to take the vaccine is dismal at best, and there's a lot of historical background, to speak to that, obviously. And so part of our role will be to sort of to provide some education to our communities about the true science behind the vaccine and why we believe that it is safe. We also know that on the education front, our K through 12 students are going to continue to suffer, right? So they've had 2 years, a year and a half, will be 2 years by the time this school year's over, of virtual learning. And we know that most of those students that will unfortunately find themselves behind will be children that look like us. So the task force is going to be looking for ways to sort of shift our focus to include the K through 12 aspect as well. And then on the economic standpoint, you know that there are second rounds of the PPP that's coming out. There are also issues around opportunity zones. And so we want to try to provide some education for our communities, small businesses in particular, how to apply for those loans. But one of the things that I learned as part of this is that when businesses were in a position to apply for some of those loans, a lot of them didn't even have the foundation in terms of things that they should have ordinarily had in place to be able to apply. So obviously that is an issue that we have to address as well. And then
Well,
on the civic,
is there somewhere a person can go to learn how to apply for these loans? Because like you just said, some of them really did not know how to apply.
well, as far as I know, that there's not a centralized location where someone can go and learn how to apply. It really is not that hard to apply for the loan. What's difficult about it is they require certain documentation. So if you've been in business for a period of time, a lot of small businesses just didn't have the infrastructure to be able to pull all of that stuff together in a way that needed to be presented for the packets. And so that is definitely an area of education that we need to address. And Dorothea Bernique, who is with Increasing Hope, Jerome
Yes.
mentioned her.
Mhm.
She's also been working with us on the COVID-19 task force. And, one of the things that I think is good about this task force is we allow everybody to function in their own gift. So that is her gift. That's what she knows best. And so we are leaning on her to be able to do what she does and provide that information to the community. And the last thing I was going to mention was about the civic engagement piece. So just because the 2020 election is over does not mean that civic engagement needs to end. In fact, we need to keep our foot on that gas pedal so that we are ensured that our voters are well educated and prepared for the next election, the midterm elections that we know are right around the corner.
Okay. Well, I thank you for that. We're going to take a break and we're going to come right back so you can tell us how the community can engage with what you're doing right after this break. Okay, welcome back to Bounce Around Charleston. Dr. Orr, tell us how the community can engage themselves with you.
So I think there's a couple of ways that the community can engage. First of all, there are, as I mentioned before, about 54 organizations that are working on some level collaboratively with us in this effort. If you are a member of any of those organizations, you can personally join the task force. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're happy to have you. If you see your organization on the screen and you hadn't heard anything about the task force, then I need you to press the president of your organization a little bit more. But also too, if you are a business owner or nonprofit organization that is in any way connected to the work that is ongoing with this task force, then we welcome you to the table to be able to offer, whatever skills and gifts you have. I didn't mention this, but one of our most recent collaborations was actually with DHEC. And Garcia can talk a little bit more about that. We were really, really blessed to have a young lady who works for DHEC, who was actually able to help us to set up some of the testing sites at several of the food distributions. And even most recently, there were several of the HBCUs that are going back to school in the next week or two. And we were able to arrange for DHEC to provide a testing strategy at 4 of those schools.
Dr. Okay, I got to get this in here before we end. Right now, the vaccine is a major conversation. So it's expressed to the people why it is so important that they get the vaccine.
So could be a long conversation, but I'm gonna sum it up as fast as I know how. It is imperative that if you are at risk, particularly those of us who are at risk, if you work out of the house. Now, if you work at home and you never leave the house and your risk is very, very low, maybe you could forego it. But that doesn't account for most of us. The majority of us are still living our lives on some level, and there's always a risk of exposure. And what the vaccine is designed to do is it doesn't mean that you still can't get COVID-19. It just means that you're less likely to end up on a respirator and die from it. It functions much like the flu shot. Same thing with the flu shot. It's no guarantee that you won't get the flu if you get the flu shot. It just means that you're less likely to die. So we have at our fingertips an opportunity to reduce the numbers, particularly of Black and Brown people who are dying in disproportionate numbers. And in addition to that, there's so much misinformation and so much conspiracy theories around the vaccine that people are using fear over science to make their decision about getting the vaccine. And that's probably the worst thing you can do. And I can understand with so much that has been going on in the last, 8 to 10 months, people were kind of like, I don't know.
All right.
These vaccines were made by independent pharmaceutical companies. They had nothing to do with the federal government in terms of how they were established and developed. So that should make people feel a little bit better. And it's all we got. It's all we got to try to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Okay. Sister Garcia Williams, anything you want to share? As you unmute yourself.
As I unmute my phone this time. No, and again, to co-sign everything, the original intent, as I said before, there was no hesitation on the part of the Medi to join this effort. And again, we are better together. Even though we've been distanced and separated throughout this process, now is the time for all of us to come together to do our part. And what you see in front of you is, as Dr. Orr said, this is just a small sampling of the power that's behind this COVID task force. And we're excited about the work yet to be done.
Well, Bounce Around Charleston wants the COVID task force to know that we are excited and happy to have you all here on Bounce Around Charleston. And if we can be of assistance to you, please feel free to call us, and we'll be so happy to bring you back to give us some more information. Thank you all for being here on Bounce Around Charleston.